We now have enemy drones flying over U.S. positions in the Middle East. So today, we're going to provide some options to our service members downrange to help them mitigate this threat with what they have available on hand. No groundbreaking new technology or training necessary, but genuinely things that you have sitting off in the corner of your motor pool that, if you put it to good use right now, could save lives today, tomorrow, next week, as this drone threat continues to expand. We're only just seeing the beginning. In fact, this video here is an enemy drone. It's an Iranian-backed Iraqi militia flying low over the U.S. Embassy complex in Baghdad. Not great. Don't love seeing that. I mean, you can't tell when these things are flying if it's armed or not, but either way, you do not want any enemy to have this level of freedom of movement over your location. Now, fortunately, this specific one was not carrying any munitions, but a couple days ago, one was. It was flying around and ended up striking old U.S. positions at Camp Liberty in Iraq. So I want to start out today with giving you an idea of what you're dealing with, these short-range drones. And there's a couple different, drone is very all-encompassing terminology. The large, long-range Shahed-style drones that are being used against U.S. bases, that is a different threat profile. You generally, there's not a lot that can be done at the soldier level on these bases to mitigate from those. You need interceptors, you need CRAM, things like that the Army and the government is working to procure. We're going to focus more on the smaller drones that are now starting to make an appearance. So short-range FPVs or first-person view drones, bomber drones, which is kind of a loose terminology for anything that can drop a munition overhead, and then to a degree, reconnaissance drones. So we've already got a little bit of that in recent footage, the FPV flying over Camp Liberty, and then the reconnaissance drone flying over the embassy in Iraq. So in terms of capabilities, there's really two key ways to look at these. You have radio-controlled drones and fiber-optic drones. So radio-controlled is kind of the normal way of going about doing this. That's something that could be jammed with electronic warfare. Fiber-optic drones, they actually carry a very thin fiber-optic cable on the drone, and it spools out behind it. That maintains the connection to the operator. That cannot be jammed with electronic warfare, and they're becoming increasingly used throughout the war in Ukraine, and now we're seeing that exported around the world, already clearly being used in Iraq. Now, in terms of distance, this varies a lot. My guess would be at this point, if you're seeing kind of early iterations of fiber optics specifically, you're probably talking strike capability in the 10 to maybe 20 kilometer range. Reconnaissance drones, of course, can push out even further. And then with radio-controlled drone drop munitions, so mostly think Mavics. We wouldn't expect at this point to see large bomber-style drones by the Iraqi militias, not yet at least. But for the Mavic-style drone drop munitions, again, 15, maybe 20 kilometers max, depending on the repeaters, depending on the battery life, things, the specific batteries that they're utilizing. But anything within 20 kilometers as a safe bet could be used to stage drone attacks on a U.S. facility. And to that end, we're going to look at static locations. All right, I don't know how many patrols are kicking out throughout Baghdad right now, but that's a whole different can of worms to open up to how to protect vehicles and convoys while they're on the move. We're going to look at fixed locations like bases, embassies, and so on. The starting one, the simplest one, the one we can fall back on that is there, it's available, nets, more nets. I can't tell you how many calls I've had in the last few months of people asking, what do you think the next new fancy counter-drone technology is, and all these different lasers and radars and tiny interceptors and all of that, and it is nets. Put them up. I'll throw some examples here. What we're seeing in Ukraine, they're using fishing net as an example. They're putting this over roads, putting this over command posts, wherever you can put it up, right? So prioritize the defenses, of course, but think command posts, barracks, whatever it might be. Camo net would work for this. Okay, I know every military unit has a ton of camo net. Most of it doesn't get used at all, and it's got a bunch of holes in it, and it's all messy. That will work. What you're going for with the netting is something that will stop the drone from going any further, as simple as that sounds. All right, so when you look at the holes in the net, bigger holes can work. I mean, you're talking about drones that, for the most part, are going to be 12 to 20 inches in width. All right, so you can have a pretty sizable gap in that netting that will still stop the drone from penetrating when you're talking about FPV or first-person view strike-style drones. Sometimes it might impact on the netting, so it will benefit to have it a little bit standing off from the actual target, but it doesn't have to be that far. I mean, sometimes it won't even detonate, and it's better than nothing, even if it does detonate a few meters off target. But then the bigger holes that you have in that netting allow drone drop munitions to come through. So pros and cons there, right? Again, the fishing netting has been ideal in Ukraine because it's small enough to be able to stop grenades and mortars from dropped overhead, as well as stopping those FPV drones when they're flying in. Secondary option there, a little harder to set up, but still, I know you've got it on hand. I know it's sitting around those bases. Fencing, just roll it out. Again, anything that can kind of stand off protection. This isn't T-walls, all right? You got to think about overhead cover. It's not the concrete barriers and the HESCOs on the ground. That's great. You got to worry about what's overhead. That's the major concern right now. So fencing can help to a degree. Of course, that's going to be heavy and difficult to set up. Also think about spare HESCO barriers. If you have some of the wiring from those, if there's a way to kind of piece that together, maybe put that over, again, static locations to just provide a little bit more standoff than they are right now, because I'm looking at these videos and there's nothing, right? The overhead cover in these areas is nothing to these drones. They're going to be able to strike and impact whatever they want. Adding to this a little bit with what you have on hand right now, electronic warfare. So I know most of that is generally allocated to vehicles. I guess it probably depends on the unit and the location, but they don't need to be on vehicles right now. If you're planning, unless you're planning on a bunch of patrols outside the wire, you need to focus on kind of building up the defenses around some of these static locations, because we're going to quickly get to a point where there's no safe space. All right, when you have anything within 20 kilometers able to launch a drone and strike inside your base, it becomes very, very difficult to operate out of that base. So we'll deal with the maneuver elements later. Right now, let's create a safe space from drones in these bases. So electronic warfare kits, what you have available can come off of vehicles and moved to static locations around the base, can be focused around specific locations, again, around prioritized command posts, barracks, things like that. As you'll see, it helps, right? We've got a lot of radio controlled drones that are available for anybody to use, including bad actors. If we can effectively shut that down, or even 20, 30, 50% shut that down, that is significant. It forces them to rely more on fiber optic drones, which are more expensive. There's fewer of them, and generally speaking, they have a shorter range. So get those electronic warfare kits out, get them operational 24/7, have them running all around the sensitive locations around the base. Now, I do want to mention briefly the good idea fairies that you're going to hear from, and you'll see them in the comment section below. And look, there's a lot of people a lot smarter than I am on this than I am, no doubt. And I'm not an expert. I try my best to talk with the experts as much as possible, try to stay up to date with what's happening, but I'm also not actively dodging drones trying to save my life in Ukraine. Those are the experts here. The good idea fairies. You're going to hear all sorts of things about, how about a chainsaw, and you can snip all those wires when they come off, or you'll hear ridiculous stuff. And it might not even sound ridiculous, but something I want you to keep in mind is, for the last 4 years, Russia and Ukraine have been losing people every single day to this threat, and trying, with literally lives on the line, trying to come up with ways to mitigate it. So we don't need to get like crazy creative and invent something all new. We need to just start there. What are they doing? Start to do that, and then we can build from there. Okay? So nets everywhere, right? Drones are going to get through. You have to have some means of protection at the last minute. Think of it like wearing a bulletproof vest, right? It's something. Nets, HESCO barriers, fencing, all of that. Beyond that, there's a possibility here, and it is so much easier said than done, but to intercept the drones at the last minute. So at this point, you're talking about the drone has made it onto the base. It's getting ready to strike. We'll call it a fiber optic drone because it hasn't been jammed by the electronic warfare. Shotguns and small arms fire can bring down drones. Again, this is one of those where we have videos of it happening, and we get the videos when it works, right? A lot of the videos that come out where it doesn't work, it just doesn't get nearly as much attention. But no doubt there are Russian and Ukrainian soldiers shooting at these things all the time when they're coming in to strike. The challenge is, even if every single soldier, every single person on the base had a shotgun, most of the time it's not going to be effective outside of about 40 or 50 meters. So you have to wait until it's coming in close. then depending on the shot pattern and what you actually hit on the drone, it may or may not cause it to malfunction or crash. And sometimes when it does crash, it's still coming directly at you and can impact and detonate on target. So shotguns are not like a golden solution here. It's better than nothing in a lot of cases, but that is not the fallback of, don't worry, we have shotguns, we'll shoot them down, because plenty of times guys are engaging these targets with shotguns, they're still getting hit with the drone, all right, if they hit the drone in the first place. Small arms fire, even harder. There are some unique rounds floating around Ukraine right now. I think the U.S. has tested some out as well, where it's almost like a small rat shot, I think is the term I heard used before, where instead of a single bullet, it kind of spreads a little bit. Again, very, very challenging to use that. If you have some of that on hand, fine. The last case is just shooting whatever you have at these things as they're inbound, which, of course, there's going to take some getting used to, right? Imagine walking around the embassy in Iraq and guys are just spraying machine gun fire overhead trying to hit a drone. So there's going to take some practice to get there. Now, I wanted to get this video up as soon as possible, right away. Last night I saw the drone flying over the embassy, and this isn't perfect. It's a starting point, and I can tell from those videos that in a lot of ways we have not begun that starting point. Maybe there's somebody that can see this, and they'll go out to the container sitting in the motor pool and say, yeah, we got some old camo netting that's just sitting out here, and they'll put it over a command post, and maybe that will stop one drone next week and actually save some lives. So the problem that we have right now is that Russia and Ukraine for 4 years have been playing this game of cat and mouse, and they're constantly innovating on this. We are not. So what that has meant is, by and large, Russia and Ukraine have mass amounts of electronic warfare jammers all across the front. So, let's say in certain sectors, electronic warfare has dropped all radio-controlled drones. So now they only have to worry about, in that sector, fiber optic drones from 1 to 17 kilometers, we'll call it. It's a smaller problem set they have to deal with. The United States is not there yet. We're still looking at kind of the entry-level drone defense. So we're not entering this trying to close a small gap. We're trying to affect a big gap, right? Everything from the radio-controlled drones up to the newest of the new fiber optics that we have a hard time jamming. So we got to get going. And the great thing in the U.S. military is we got a lot of really, 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 really smart people all throughout the ranks, and they're innovative, they're flexible, and hopefully they're going to see this threat emerging in real time and start to come up with new innovations that we haven't necessarily seen on the battlefield in Ukraine or Russia. Now, last piece here, my email is preston@warstories.co. I'll have it on the screen here. I'll have it in the description below as well. If there's any U.S. or allied units downrange that are working right now to try to protect against this threat, I'm happy to answer any questions I can or try to put you in touch with the right person. We've got a lot of experience watching how this is being handled in Ukraine. There's no reason to start at zero. We can start a couple steps ahead and do everything we can with what we have on hand right now to protect lives that are in the war zone. That's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.